Productions, Praxis Pedagogy exists to position our teaching and learning practice within different methodologies. We want to construct a guild of educators dedicated to designing a difference in our own teaching and learning and in our students' experience. Hey everybody, welcome back to Praxis Pedagogy Podcast, episode 76. In this episode, I sit down with Peter Kelly. So Peter teaches in the Built Environment Engineering Technology program, and they are offering a HyFlex model that emphasizes flexibility. Now, this new format allows students to choose between online, face-to-face, or a combination of those to support their learning. It's an interesting approach and one I think that we need to give more attention to as we move down this road called education. Sit back, relax, enjoy. We'll catch you on the other side. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, welcome back to Praxis Pedagogy Podcast. So glad you tuned in for this episode number 76. And I have with me a very special guest from a neighboring province of Alberta, right from Medicine Hat College. Yes, Medicine Hat College. It seems to be on the forefront of a lot of great things happening lately. And we have Peter Kelly from Medicine Hat College. Peter, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks very much. Looking forward to having a chat with you here.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Peter, I first kind of bumped into you online in the LinkedIn world and was following along with you as you were sending out information and kind of your early learnings about something that has come across everyone's plate recently because of this situation that we're in. And that is HyFlex learning. But before we dive into that, Peter, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background and what brought you to Medicine Hat College.
Yeah, so I came originally via Ottawa. So I'm from a little town outside of Ottawa called Manotick, and I did my undergrad or most of my undergrad at Carleton U. And at some point near the end, I drove my parents nuts, but I was about 2 classes short of finishing, and I moved to Banff for a summer to go play in Banff. And then got sidetracked in a hotels career for a few years. And so I was originally studying history and theory of architecture at Carleton U, and followed a path of opportunity in the hotels for a while. So I spent 5 years at the Banff Springs Hotel and the Rimrock Resort Hotel in Banff before deciding to kind of move back in the architecture direction. It took a few years, and hotels was fun, learned a lot, but it wasn't quite for me. And in that time, I met my wife, Miranda, and we got married in that time when I was working at the Rimrock. And she was very supportive of my decision to finish school. And so I actually finished by distance. And that was my first reflection back when I started thinking about HyFlex is it came from that direction originally. And so when that decision was made for me to go back to school, I finished my degree and still wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to get a little bit more into the practice of architecture. And so went to SAIT in Calgary to do my diploma in architectural technology. And in that time, my wife got a promotion at a hotel in Calgary. And so we spent 5 years there. And that was when I finished that, I went to work for a restaurant supply company. And I got my first real respect for the connection that our industry has with the trades and how closely we work together. And it was through that experience that I felt I had probably my greatest learning curve was at that time. Then went to work for a big architectural firm in Calgary for a couple of years. And my wife got a job in Banff. So we went back to Banff and I worked for a boutique architectural firm there for a little while. And then the recession hit in 2008 and I got laid off, started my own business, worked for myself, worked for a big engineering firm for a few years. And in that time, my wife got an opportunity to teach here in Medicine Hat. And so we picked up and moved to Medicine Hat, I'm going to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 years ago now. And I kept doing my own business. And then after a couple of years, an opportunity came up. My wife knew some instructors in the architectural technologies area here at the college. It was actually called a CADD technical illustrator program at the time. And they were looking for an instructor to teach part-time to cover a sabbatical that an instructor had taken. And then I followed another path of opportunity and took a part-time contract and then another part-time contract and then ended up getting on full-time. And I've been full-time here at the college for about 10 years now.
That's great. And so in the college, what do you teach other than CAD?
So the program is called Built Environment Engineering Technology. And so if you take a look at your environment, anything that's built by people is our built environment. So that's the buildings that we live and work in. It's the products that we use every day. It's the infrastructure that connects us. And so my background being architectural technology, I've been teaching on the building side, but I also teach in some of the fundamental areas, technical communication, introduction to drafting, I taught for a while, introduction to AutoCAD, I taught for a while. I teach a sustainability and systems thinking course as well. So I've kind of touched on a whole bunch of different areas across the program, but I've always kind of kept my feet in the architectural side.
Nice. So as a bit of a side note, there's been quite a turn from my perspective, just as a layperson out in industry watching things get built. But there seems to be a lot more wood involved in our building environment. Is that true, or is that just something that I'm just seeing because I'm a weirdo?
No, absolutely. You're seeing that. You're seeing a lot more wood, a lot more engineered wood products. Mass timber construction has become quite popular.
And so why is that, do you think?
It's a few different things. I think one, just because of the natural beauty of the material is a big thing. I think the technology of engineered wood has come a long way, over the years. So you can do a lot more with it. As we've, the whole history of architecture and engineering is the more you use something, more you try something. There's a trial and error process. There's pushing the limits. And so over the years, as the technologies advanced, people have pushed the limits of what you can do. And you've learned how much more you can do through that process. So I think it's a natural evolution, I think.
Yeah. I remember when I was framing houses, this is a long time ago. I remember the advent of the Paralam when it came out and just how it changed the way we framed houses forever, right? Where you could span 20, 25, 30 feet with this huge Paralam beam that weighed, it was massively heavy, but it would support so much weight that, and I remember at the time seeing advertisements for it on TV when people still watch TV, where they would hang like a Volkswagen Beetle from this tiny little Paralam, and there was no deflection and it held it perfectly.
I know. And I've seen garage floors that are built out of engineered wood so that you can use that as more basement space below your garage. So home theaters being built underneath the garage, so you don't have to worry about that sound resonating through the rest of the house.
Okay. That's cool. I like that. Good. So, going back to the hotel industry, like what were some of your best learning moments from the hotel industry?
Oh my Lord, there's so many and talk about a learning curve. Banff is quite the melting pot to begin with. There's people from not just all over the country, but all over the world. And so working at a big hotel like the Banff Springs, you got to work with people from just every type of culture and every background. So I think that was especially when I started supervising after a while, is learning to work with the cultural differences was a big learning curve.
Huh. So was there quite a transient employment base? Like, were they there for a season and then gone and then come back for a season, or were they pretty stable?
A bit of both. There was definitely the stable base that we had a lot of people that have been around from one year to the next. And I still see people on Facebook that are, have been there since, I was there. God, I don't want to say like 20, 30 years ago. And then some, yes, very transient, just, wanting to come and get the experience for a summer.
Nice. Very cool. So when you started teaching at Medicine Hat College, what was going through your brain when you're like, okay, I'm in a classroom and I'm actually doing this?
Oh my Lord, that was that was something else. Almost, it was fear in some ways, and a lot of fun in some ways. Fun because I think somewhere in the multiverse, I was a teacher to begin with. That was one of the things I thought of when I was younger. So I really enjoyed kind of getting into that environment. One of the things I liked when I was in hotels was doing training and stuff like that. But scared at the same time, just because it was so new and just, you're literally jumping into the deep end and just trying to figure it out. All the swimming metaphors that go with that, right?
Yeah. Swimming with cement shoes and in the deep end, no snorkel, the whole deal, right?
Yeah. And then, that, good Lord, I remember doing something like a building systems course and finding out that there was somebody who was a journeyman plumber or journeyman electrician in the program who was reskilling. And I'm like, I'm supposed to know all this stuff that they could teach this unit of this course. And back then I had the mentality of, you're supposed to know everything. And, what if, there's not supposed to be a question you don't know how to answer. That's changed for me over time.
Yeah, for sure. I've had the same experience where I've been teaching a night school class and then I find out that there's an electrical engineer from another country who's got, all this training. And here I am teaching basic electrical. And I'm like, you don't even need to be here. Like, just read these few things and I'll see you next week. More often than not, they're very gracious and like, no, it's okay. And it'll be good. And I remember there were more than once, that person and I would talk after class and I'd be like, so am I doing this right? Like, am I covering everything that I should be covering? And I mean, I knew the material, but I just wanted to make sure there weren't like glaring loopholes or something important that I was missing. And so I know the feeling when you find out that someone is in their classroom that's got way more experience in something that you're supposed to be teaching. And you're like, okay, let's just get through this.
Yeah, and then after a period of time, just once I started getting more comfortable in the classroom, I was like, hey, this is something I can actually leverage and embrace. And to say, hey, Joe, or whatever that guy's name was, like, tell us about, when you did this. And then they go and, they take off with the lesson for a while at that point.
And that's gold when it happens, right? Because you're just sitting back and now you become like one of the students and you're just letting this person just go, right? That's just gold.
Yeah. And then for everybody else in the classroom, they're starting to hear the relevance as well, that it's not just, apparently there's something in a book and a course outline that says I'm supposed to know this stuff. There's somebody who's been out there doing it. They're talking about the value.
Yeah. Amazing. So talk a little bit about the mindset changes that occurred for you as you moved through your teaching career.
So I'd say that was probably the one of them is recognizing a certain point that, I'm not going to have all the answers, and that whole, you're the subject matter experts. And I've got subject matter experience instead. I'll use a different E for it. And, getting over that fear that, I'm not sure about that, but let's go and explore that. And we'll go and kind of take that tangent in the class, right? You know what, I'll look into that and we'll talk about that in next class. So that was one of the mindsets. I'd say the biggest one for me that kind of got me kind of going in the whole pedagogy direction a little bit before I even knew what that word was. It was, I remember at a certain point looking at a rubric that I made and marking some papers or drawings or whatever it was. I'm like, the grade that I'm coming up with just doesn't look like it reflects what is happening in the drawing. Like what I see here is not the same as what my rubric is coming up with. And so that was my first dive down that way is, what does an A actually look like? What does a C look like? And how do I have a rubric that can get there? How do I communicate that with students? And so that was probably the biggest one. And that I delved into was, what is acceptable? What is exceptional? What isn't? How do students understand how to get from one place to the next? How do I help them get there? And how do we kind of identify that ultimately with that grade that we need to come up with in the end?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So did you reach out to your LTC to help you with that, or did you just walk through it on your own?
A little bit with the LTC. I've got to say, so our college is called CITE, so the Center for Innovation and Teaching Excellence, I think is what the acronym stands for. So I knew them a little bit at the time, but I wasn't fully aware of what they did. At first, I thought it was they, kind of helped to figure out how to use the LMS Blackboard. We got a pretty close group in our program. So I'd say it was the conversation more sort of happened as those water cooler and, Friday lunchtime type conversations. So, James, what are you doing right now? Like, how do you figure out what, that C, what's satisfactory, what's the A exceptional kind of thing? And that was more sort of in-house in our group.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So let's talk a little bit about HyFlex learning. First of all, tell us your working definition of HyFlex learning, and then tell us a little bit about how you stumbled across it.
So I don't know about a definition that I have per se, but I kind of gone with what does HyFlex stand for, the hybrid flexible. It's about being flexible ultimately for our students. How I came across it was the pandemic, right? Like the necessity is the mother of invention, and trying to figure out how to do stuff. And, we moved our program completely online, but getting towards the end of the semester when, in our second year, when students are working on kind of those culminating projects, when they're just like, we'd really like to come into the class and just get help. But with the social distancing and all that kind of stuff, we couldn't have everybody in the room at the same time. So I was trying to figure out, well, how do we get students in and do this, but without doubling up on the effort at the same time? Because I try to do everything that I can for our students to help them out, but there's also only so many hours in the day. So that's kind of where it came from. And so I was in a meeting with Chad Flynn, and I was talking to him and say, hey, back when I was at Carleton, I remember one of my classes that I was sitting in the lecture and there was a TV camera in the back of the room. And Carleton University actually had a television channel at the time. So back in the 90s, they had a TV station. And so the lecture would be broadcast on, at like Thursday at 2 p.m. or whatever. So you could go to the lecture live, or you could watch it at home on Thursday at 2 p.m. or whatever time that class was being broadcast. You could record it on your VHS tape at home, or you could get the VHS from the library. And I ended up finishing my degree that way, is they mailed the videotapes to me out in Banff, and I watched them. And so I talked to Chad about this, and this was happening back in the 90s. Like there has to be an equivalent of that now. And he's like, yeah, it's called HyFlex. And so then I was just like, squirrel, and off I go.
Oh, that's hilarious. So they had their own channel, right? So like UHF channel 341 or something crazy like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hilarious. Tune into TV and have school on TV. That's hilarious. Or mailing out VHS. So even before the idea of Netflix emailing out DVDs, the school's mailing out VHS tapes.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how we finished my degree. My mom started going back to university at the same time I did. And that's how she completed her journalism degree. And a good portion of those classes was done that way. She would pick up the videotapes and she'd watch them at night after she had finished, feeding and cleaning the kids and all that kind of stuff.
Oh man. Can you imagine walking home with like 8 or 10 VHS tapes in your arms? Just this big pile of, oh man. Now we don't even carry a memory stick. We just log on to YouTube and off you go, right?
I tried to explain it to my kids and they just didn't get it.
They're just staring at you like, VHS? What is that? Beta? VCRs? Please.
They don't still even really understand like live broadcast radio or television. They're like, how does that work? And the 6-year-old's watching TV and the pause button won't work.
There you go. The pause button won't work. Oh, that's amazing. So when you first heard about HyFlex and you went squirrel and started running down that trail, what surprised you the most right off the bat about HyFlex?
Well, when I first started looking at it, it seemed complicated. But for the, kind of the timing that I was in, I'm like, I don't have time for complicated and we don't have money for this stuff. So what surprised me the most was kind of from my perspective was how easy it was to do and how quickly the students got on board with it as well.
So talk to me a little bit about the setup. So when I envision HyFlex learning, I envision like multiple cameras, multiple TVs, you have a computer screen, you're trying to bounce back and forth between live and virtual. Like, am I even close or what's going on there?
Yeah, that's sort of it. One of the things I would caution people about is HyFlex is that the first conversation is always the technology. How are you doing it? And I would circle back and say, what are you trying to do first? And what are you trying to do in your class? What are you teaching? How do you envision teaching it? And then figure out what technology to use to do it. It's, they're all tools, right? And there's 100 different tools in your toolbox. And yeah, you can probably use a crescent wrench to drive a nail if you have to, but it's not the best tool to do it. So I'd circle back to what are you trying to do first? In our classrooms, we're fortunate, like we're a technology program. So every student's in front of a computer to begin with. And we have dual projection in our classrooms already. So we're very fortunate that we have a good setup that way already. As we were teaching online, started to realize that, hey, with Teams or Zoom or whatever, you can flip between cameras. So I remember having, a camera propped up on my desk. I think every teacher in the world had something jury rigged on their desk with a camera pointing down to. Right. I saw all kinds of stuff. Kids were building contraption at Legos for their parents to use. And so we already knew that, just in Teams or in Zoom, you could flip between cameras. So there we had that bit of infrastructure in place already. So then it was just, hey, IT department, can you install, Teams or whatever onto the students' computers in the classrooms too? And then it was like, all right, I had a couple of webcams that I pilfered from my home office and I brought into school, and my wife had a tripod that she wasn't using. So I grabbed that and I put a tripod up in the classroom pointing at the whiteboard at the front of the room. And I put another camera on the computer monitor. So it's just kind of like you and I on Zoom right now. And that's how it started. And the camera was really just, it was another point of eye contact, right? So when you're talking in front of the class and you're looking at all your different students, you just had to, okay, that camera is also somewhere to make eye contact with, to engage with those people online. So it started about as grassroots as it can get, I guess, of a couple of webcams and a tripod on Teams.
Right. So how much did the HyFlex setup, how much did it change the way you deliver? Because I know you got to deliver the same content that you did a month ago or a year ago. So, I get that, but how did it change the way you deliver outside of the obvious that there's the virtual side to it?
It's being cognizant of those three different modes of delivery, that you've got the asynchronous, the synchronous, and the face-to-face, and being conscious of those three modes at the same time. So when we first started doing it, so for those last few weeks of the winter semester last year, we had already been teaching online for a while. So we kind of been pre-making some stuff that the students did on their own homes. We'd kind of massaged out a lot of that stuff already. And so it was a pretty natural transition. The students were all pretty tech savvy and used to it by then. But it was still pretty ad hoc. So this year, I spent some more time reading up, and I took some classes through Conestoga College in Ontario. And it's about circling back to the objectives again. What are you trying to teach, and why are you trying to teach it? And then what are you doing to teach that? So what are the lessons? What are the exercises you're doing? And there's more than one way to do it. And so maybe it was changing up the way that we did things in some lessons, perhaps.
So when you say that there's more than one way to do it, like what do you mean by that?
So for the one that the go-to for a lot of people, the discussion board, right? So in my sustainability class, it's a lot of it's just talking. It's talking about definition of sustainability. What do you think about biomimicry and all that kind of stuff? And so it's putting that out there on discussion boards as well. So hey, you guys that were face-to-face or synchronous online, post a summary of that onto a discussion board and engage in some of that discussion outside of class time as well. So we don't need to do, that's often me driving things in that scenario. So, and once you kind of push it into their realm through something like a discussion board, then it's them driving it a bit more. Students that are in our second year, they get behind that a little bit more than somebody who's just coming into their first semester in their first year. It's a bit foreign. And so I did my master's through Royal Roads. And so on those discussion boards, it has to be at least three posts and 3 responses of a minimum of 100 words each and stuff like that. And I'm not super keen on that. I like it to be a little bit more fluid, but I'm seeing that, okay, so for, I've discovered in these first few weeks, I actually do need to put some of that structure in place for those guys that aren't used to it. So let's develop those habits by saying, yes, you do need to do those 3 posts of 100 words each and support it with a quote out of the readings, and just to get them used to that. So that would be one thing I would say, is just how to take that dialogue into that digital realm.
Interesting. I'm a Royal Roads grad too. So when you talk about your master's and your experience with that, it brings back so many memories of, having to engage with people. So when you're running your class, I'm envisioning you have some students in front of you face to face. You have some students online, and you can see them in a monitor. Are you recording the session too, so that you can provide it to them later on as a recording, or are you just running it live, and when class is over, it's over?
I'm recording as well. Yes. So they can have it to run back to, but also any students that were asynchronous, they can still see and hear what was going on in that classroom setting as well.
Are you giving students agency to choose how they want to engage with the material, whether it's face-to-face, online, or asynchronously? Or sorry, so asynchronously?
Yes. So they've been told from the outset that they have the choice. They can, from one day to the next, they can decide if they're going to be asynchronous, synchronous, or face-to-face in the classroom. And especially over the last week and everything that's been happening with the COVID restrictions over the last week, that's been definitely taken advantage of. And from one day to the next, they can see the difference of who's online, who's not, who's in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. How much of an adjustment was that for you? Because obviously being in front of a class, we're used to seeing that, but how has that adjustment made you feel?
I'm kind of an all-in person, so I just jumped in with it. You definitely have to have a different mindset a little bit when you're doing it, because one of the things I've noticed is just that fluidity of moving around the classroom. I like to walk around the room and be in different places, and it's not even because I'm using a whiteboard versus something else. I just wander around the room, and so I've had to be a bit more conscious of that. Of okay, so if I'm wandering around, am I moving out of frame from the camera, for example? And so one of the comments that came from students last year is, I just had those two cameras set up of, one just at the instructor's computer at the front of the room and one pointing towards the whiteboard. But if I was going around the room, somebody would have a question about something that's happening on their computer screen or, looking at something in their book. Well, the students that are online can't see that. So some feedback from the students that were online was saying, hey, any chance you could get another camera and point it into the room so that we can see what's going on at those times. So yeah, excellent. And thank you guys for jumping in, telling us what's going to make this work for you.
Yeah. So they're not.
So then you have to be a bit of your own producer, flipping between cameras at the right time and stuff. So that just takes getting familiar with it.
So they're not really interested in seeing how you're integrating with that one student in the classroom. Like they don't want to see what's on the screen so much. They just want to know where you are in relationship to the room so that they can track with you.
I think it's just that awareness and seeing just that there's something happening, right? Because otherwise, if I'm out of frame, then what's on their computer screen? It's the wall. And so they might hear my voice talking to somebody, but there's no context with it. So I think it's the context that they like to get with it and just seeing something happening on your screen, right? If there's something happening on your screen, then you're going to pay more attention. If it's just a wall, then you're going to lose them.
Yeah, no kidding. So getting a little nitty gritty now, when you're talking about all this hardware, like you have 3 cameras now, right? Did you have to do anything different with software and your computer and hardware?
No. So we use Teams, but whether it's Teams or Zoom or whatever, you have the ability to flip between cameras. So we actually didn't do anything new as far as software goes. We just use what's natively there to be able to flip between cameras. The only other hardware I would say was getting a wireless lapel microphone so they could you weren't chained to the computer station.
Right. Okay. Huh. Oh, I got so many ideas running around in my head right now. It's not even funny.
Then after that, like I said, it's about what are you doing and what technology do you need to do it? So we work with drawings all the time. So, one of the things that Chad introduced me to was the Wacom pen display. So it was actually kind of helpful to put a Wacom pen display at the instructor station because people could see what's happening on that much more clearly than the camera pointed at the whiteboard. And so, yeah, it's knowing what's happening with the technology and what it's capable of.
And being willing to try it out and being willing to fail a little bit because you're not going to know everything, right? And you're going to make some mistakes as you go along. Yeah,
absolutely. And in our program, we work with technology all the time, and our students learn that very quickly is that the tech, it's not always going to work 100%. And that's part of life. And so how do we either troubleshoot or find the workarounds? And they learn that, it's probably once a week that there's something that, this tool in AutoCAD's not working right. Or, my mouse isn't, tracking properly or something, right? So our students have been pretty good about, working with us through some of those learning curves.
Nice. Do you do any post-production with the recording, or do you just like press record, off you go, stop, and then load it up?
Very seldom have I done any post-production. It's more so of, I know, like if I came into the class, 5 or 10 minutes early or forgot to stop recording, and I know that there's, 10 minutes of dead air, that I might do some post-production to clip out some of that. But otherwise, it's for me, it's just a time thing that I don't, my skill set in the production is pretty minimal. And there's that word authenticity as well, that, everything that's happening in the classroom, you don't get to edit that. Right. So if you stumble, you make a mistake, whatever it happens to be, you mispronounce something, you do the math wrong, like all that happens in the classroom. And so why edit that out for people that are watching afterwards? I think it's more the things that's going to impact, there's 10 minutes of dead air, you're losing me, that I'll edit out. But all that other stuff, that's what the classroom looks like. it's messy sometimes.
Yeah, no kidding. Besides, if someone's there, like if they're live or even virtually live and you've recorded it and then they come back and watch the recording and the recording's different from the session that they were just in, that would be weird. Like they'd be like, hey, why'd you cut that out? That'd be, and then they probably wonder what else you're cutting out. That's very cool. So how is this system contributing to the learner in their journey through your course? Because one of the things that I keep bumping into is, well, if students are given the agency to choose whether they're there in person, virtually, or asynchronously, what's stopping them from doing the whole class asynchronously, right? So there's that question. And how is this delivery model affecting their learning of the material as you go through the course?
So in the first part, there's nothing stopping them from going asynchronously. And that's part of our commitment, is that you are still going to learn all those outcomes and objectives that we have, that those things, skills that you need to have, that knowledge you need to have. We've committed that you will have those skills and that knowledge, regardless of which way you choose to participate. So that's incumbent on us as the instructors to help make sure that happens. But there's also a commitment from the students to make sure that happens as well. And that's one of the things we talk about, is that when you make that decision to be synchronous or in the classroom, you've set that time aside to be present. And so one of the things we talk about, if you're going to be online asynchronously, you still need to be present. You still need to set that time aside, that if this class is 4 hours a week, you still need to be planning on that 4 hours somehow to commit to do that. I can give 100%, and if a student gives 0, they're not going to learn what they need to learn or what I'm hoping they will. If they give 100% and I give nothing, it's still going to be the same. It's a two-way street. We both need to give as close to 100 as we can for it to work.
Yeah, no kidding. And so that's going to take a bit of a mind shift too for some instructors as well, right? Because when the one thing we do when we give students agency is we give up control.
Yes. And, teaching online, teaching HyFlex, or face-to-face for that matter, that it takes the right instructor for the right mode of delivery as well. And if as an instructor, you're not committed to that mode of delivery, that you would prefer to be doing something else than what you are doing, is it going to be the same experience for you or for the student? So, there's a commitment involved for sure.
Right. How's the rest of the department responded to the HyFlex? Are they doing it too, or is it just yourself and they're kind of watching how it unfolds?
No, so last winter it was just me. That was kind of my proof of concept, if you will, I guess, to try it out and help the students out. But by the end of last winter semester, getting into the spring, there's a few things going on that, one of the instructors in our program, Elio Colasso, had been saying for years, that we need to start figuring out how to deliver online. It's the way of the future. People want this. And all of us are like, yep, absolutely. You're right. And we'll figure it out later. We'll figure it out later. We'll figure it out later. And so COVID pushed us into a spot where we had to figure it out. So, there's a bit of that. There's a bit of, what's the fall really going to look like? Like, COVID was still in the air, so to speak. So we should be looking at online anyway. We need to be prepared to be flexible if restrictions happen. And we're also looking at kind of enrollment and accessibility to the program anyway. How can we cast a broader net without increasing the number of sections, because we didn't want that cost as well. And so all those pieces came together, and we talked about it as a group, and we made a commitment as a group to actually, we're offering with the exception of, say, 1 class, 2 classes, the whole program is being offered HyFlex. And so all the instructors have their own little twists and bends that they're taking as they address it for the different material they teach and the different contents. But we've all gone that direction, with the exception of 2 classes.
So do you guys have, well, I may even be answering my own question, but because you're in the same department, it would almost be a natural step to have a little micro community of practice as all of you are doing this HyFlex and, like you just said, doing some of it differently. I'm sure that there's going to be some tips and tricks and things that are learned that are passed on amongst the different people in your department.
Yeah, and we've always had a really close group that thing I mentioned already. Like we get together at lunch on Fridays almost all the time. The weeks go by that we don't, but we get together whether there's an agenda or not, just to what's been going on this week and who knows where the conversation's going to go. And so, yeah, so there's those conversations that happen with us all the time. We've got our WhatsApp group that, we're messaging on, and it's even down to, I'll get a message show up, from an instructor saying, hey, a microphone's not working and I don't know what to do. And so I'll, run over to the lab and, help them, figure out what's not going on right with the microphone or whatever. So we've got a pretty great working relationship that community. It just is with us.
It just is. I like that. So now that you've done it for a while, what would you do differently if you had to start over, but you've got this knowledge now?
For me, time is always a thing. I would say if I had the time, if I made the time to try to preload more, I would say, of that asynchronous type stuff. I'd say that's about it. That would be the first thing, is just that time commit, and time is there for teachers always, right? Time to mark and all that stuff. So the biggest thing I think is time.
Yeah. Have you found your marking load increase because of this type of delivery?
No, it hasn't. And the way that students are engaging with the material might be a little bit different from one student to the next, but overall, I've tried to do things such as that the assessment that we're doing is everybody still engaging in the same assessment activities.
Okay. Very cool. Good. Well, Peter, this has been fantastic. I've learned quite a lot. I've got a few more questions for you. And I'm sure that we'll circle around again in the future to see how this is working out for you as you learn more and walk down this path. Peter, what books have you read recently that have made an impact on you? Could be HyFlex, could not be. It's up to you.
Yeah. So one, and I'm going to be terrible here that I can't remember the names exactly, but Brian Beatty, who's kind of the grandfather of HyFlex, has an OER book about HyFlex that I've been reading. That's been good. Honestly, for my own personal headspace, is getting to disconnect a bit, and so actually reading some Hieronymus Bosch detective novels has been good for me lately. Nice,
little escapism. I like it. Beautiful. What podcasts are you listening to that you'd recommend?
Well, I'm only just kind of in the, since the last winter, I guess, gotten into podcasts. And to be honest, it was Vicky Roy and Chad Flynn that put me on to praxispedagogy. So that's where things started for me. And then as I started to hear about HyFlex, then it was teaching in higher ed and cult of pedagogy that I started listening to after hearing, just Google searching and finding some podcasts that they had done on the topic. And so those are the podcasts that I've been listening to.
Nice. When this podcast grows up, I hope it's like teaching in higher ed or cult of pedagogy. I listen to those too. I really like cult of pedagogy because it just seems so practical, right? Where it's just, here's the thing, and here's a bunch of worksheets that I've done, and here's what I think you should do with them. I just love her approach.
Yeah. And that's, it's one of those things that I get just in the school that I'm in. I'm in the School of Trades and Technology, and it's that trades mentality that I really like. That's in that praxis thing that you do, and the cult of pedagogy as well. It's just like, yeah, I know there's all these grand ideas and grand topics out there, but right now here's the thing that I need to work on. How do I do it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know there's a specific tool out there, but I just need some duct tape right now. Like I just really need a good piece of duct tape.
Exactly.
Very good. Very good. All right, Peter, as we round up our time together again, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your knowledge and your experiences and your journey. My last question for you as we say goodbye is this. It's a fill in the blank question. My contribution. So Peter, your contribution over the next 3 to 4 months will be.
Oh my Lord. You did tell me this was coming, and my brain hasn't circled around it very well. In the next 4 to 5 months, I'm going to be starting a new role at the college as the chair for trades and technology. So one of the things that I'm going to have to do, the foundations are there already, but getting those relationships with on the trade side of the house, getting a better understanding of how that whole trades world works. I'm not super keen on that separation of the trades and the academics. Unfortunately, it is there still. And so I've got to toe over into that world, and I need to step over into that world a little bit more and get a better understanding of that trades world and how that works. And that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. That's going to be cool. And, you've got a pretty good dean over there at Medicine Hat College in Trades and Technology. So I'm sure he'll have lots of insights and ideas for you to how to bridge that gap. Cause you're right. There is a gap between the two groups. And I know people like Chad and even yourself as you move into that role. And there's other people in the provinces of British Columbia and Alberta that are working hard at bridging that gap. And so all the best to you as you move into that position. And again, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate you sharing your journey and your foray into HyFlex. You've answered some questions for me that have actually dispelled a little bit of fear of moving into that realm. And so I will go on record as to say I'm going to try doing some HyFlex in my own night school class here coming up. And we'll circle back and share some more stories about what worked and what didn't work.
Well, you know what? It would be great because I'm interested in having the same conversation in, 6 or 8 months from now after we've gone through a couple of semesters and have that conversation with some students too. That's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to in the coming weeks and coming months is getting that feedback from the students. How is it working for you and what can we do?
That's a really good point. I love that. Just writing that down. All right, people, you heard it here first. 6 to 8 months from now, we're going to circle back and we'll bring some students with us. And maybe we'll need to buckle up because, it can go crazy sideways in a hurry with some students online. But that's good. That's really good. Thanks again, Peter. And wish you all the best as you move into your new position as chair of Trades and Technology.
Great. Thanks very much, Tim. I've loved this.